All right. Hello, hello, and good afternoon. Welcome, everyone who's in the place today. Welcome to everyone who's joining. I am going to actually share my hosting privileges with Deborah, who so graciously volunteered to help out today. Thank you so much, Deb. Uh, and there we go. So I hope this doesn't like mess with my display. I don't think it will. All right. So we'll do that. And we will take a couple of moments as people join in um, to the chat for today. Super excited for you all to be here. And I was actually just thinking today, like how this is the highlight of my week. I love being here with you guys and chatting and hearing your stories and sharing and all of that stuff. So yeah, thank you guys so much for being present here for the relationship series. And we are we are in season 4 of the relationship series. So we've been going for a number of seasons now, and it's been exciting, getting better every season. And I'm listening and taking your suggestions. So thank you guys so much for your feedback. All right, we'll jump in for today because you guys have so graciously allowed for your lunch hour, and we want to make sure, and I want to make sure that I honor your time and that we take the allocated amount of time and no more than that. So welcome to the relationship series, season number 4. We have transformational conversations here that revolutionize our relationships. We have a saying: we do the work, we heal for real, and we sow what we want to grow. My name is Genevieve. I am a speaker, I am a trainer, I am a coach, and a registered psychotherapist. I love relationships. I have a passion for relationships, for quality relationships, for learning how to do relationships well, and for being healthy in relationships. So I get to do this every week, talk with others about how to do that, and talk with others who are also passionate about that. So it's wonderful for me. Um, I love to say that I'm a passion person and not an expert because I struggle in relationship just like everybody else. I have I have issues and things to work through and things to work out just like everybody else. But I really do believe that time spent talking about relationships is time well spent, right? Because we were created for relationship. We're created to attach, to connect, to be interdependent. With our fellow human beings. And so if we can figure out how to do this the best way possible, and to continuously learn that, I think that's really sort of a beautiful pursuit of life, and it's meaningful and fulfilling for me. So yeah, grateful to be here. Not an expert, but certainly a passion person when it comes to the work. All right, so we're going to jump in today. We'll be talking about, what are we talking about? Raising rich kids today. So this is our family series, our relationship series, family edition. And so we'll be talking about children and legacy, and we've talked already about, just sort of different aspects of family. So family and prayer and family and vacations, and how we can strengthen the bonds that we do have with our family. So today we're going to be talking about raising rich kids, and I think it's definitely a relevant topic. Um, and I think it's because ultimately we are looking for, striving for, moving towards connecting with another individual. Most of us want to establish that kind of strong romantic relationship. And then establish a family from there. And so it's important for us to be thinking as those who pour into the next generation, right? Like, what are we doing with what we are creating? Right? What are we doing with the kids? What are we doing with the marriage? What is the purpose of coming together? And really be thinking about that more intentionally. And I named it Raising Rich Kids, and we'll be talking a little bit more about that. In terms of the joys and challenges, yes, of parenting, but also it's not just about what you leave your children in terms of like finances and money, but what you leave them in terms of their ability and capacity to navigate the world well, and to embody the standards and the values that are important for life. And so raising rich kids, yes, it does have to do with money, and we'll be talking about money, but it's so much more than that. And I will hear from you guys and really invite you guys to share and to, tell me your stories, because I don't have kids of my own. I have, godchildren and cousins and things like that that I love and adore. But I don't invest in them in terms of time and energy and resources in the same way that their parents or their primary caregivers will. So, it's important for me to hear from you all as well. So our agenda, very similar to the weeks and days before. We'll be talking about our why are we talking about this. We'll look at some quotes, some stats. Rich Dad, Poor Dad is a great book. I am not being paid to endorse the book, but I have listened to the book and read the book. I actually passed on my hard copy of the book to one of my younger cousins this past year. And he's just, moving into his early 20s and, thinking about life, thinking about what he wants for his future, thinking about how to do that well. And I thought, yes, this is a great book to pass on to him. But I do have the audio version. So I got a chance to, or took the time really to re-listen to it this week. And so we'll be talking about some tidbits in there. So many amazing nuggets in that book. My goodness, if you don't have it or if you haven't read it, download it on Audible or, get the hard copy, because it really is a great book. It's a classic. It's been around for a quarter of a century. It's sold all over the world, so many different languages, 40 million, copies or what have you. And the principles are time tested. The advice, the counsel, the wise words are time tested, over the last few decades. And we're seeing the fruit really of some of the thoughts, even though at the time of the writing of the book, the thoughts were kind of difficult to digest. They were difficult to really internalize because they were so vastly in contrast to the cultural agenda of the time. So we'll get a chance to see a few quotes that I just kind of snuck in here. And we'll look, of course, at the benefits of doing what we're doing. I'll challenge you again, as I do every week. We'll look at what's coming up and we'll answer some questions should you guys have any. All right. So why are we doing this? Well, I'm glad you asked. And if you guys want to throw your emails in the chat and just introduce yourselves, that's always a thing. I always invite you guys to share. You can put up your hands, you can turn on your microphones. You can also just post your comments in the chat. And I know some people are at work, and so, they can't really speak or talk or what have you, but you guys can, type. So put your comments in the chat and we'll read them out and invite them into the conversation. And I like to say I'm interruptible. I'm interruptible because, yes, it is a presentation in some senses of the word. We have, things that we want to get through, laying a foundation, giving you, some good content, some good information and sharing. But at the end of the day, it's meant to be a space where we can collaborate, where we can talk, where we can share our ideas and our thoughts so we can learn from one another. So again, I'm interruptible. Raise your hand, join in as you see fit and so desire. Okay, so why are we talking about this? Well, fundamentally, we are here to revolutionize our relationships and to do relationships well. And relationships necessarily or naturally uh, replicate. So relationships build, right? So we get into relationships, we connect with other people, um, and we naturally evolve as we get to know one another, as we are ourselves are known. And so we tend then to um, uh, reproduce after our likeness, after our kind, after our ideas, after our mindsets. And we also tend to connect with or bond more closely with individuals who have similar ideas and similar mindset, similar life approaches, similar values, similar belief systems and worldviews or schemas to ourselves. And so when we look at how relationships replicate, it's by the engagement or the interaction. So in terms of raising rich kids, we want to highlight the pattern, the nature of patterns in relationships. And so studies have shown, research has shown over hundreds of years that the likelihood of, say, children getting a certain level of education, making us, making it into a certain income bracket, believing a particular, a faith or believing in a particular faith, are the likelihood of them doing that is highly contingent or determined by, what their parents have done, what kind of money their parents earn, what kind of education their parents have earned, and things like that. So there's a natural correlation, and then there are, of course, opportunities to supersede, surpass, to really go either way. You can do more or do less, and but those are the more intentional examples, right? So I want to be the first in my family to graduate from college. And I've heard this story many times, if there are immigrant families or families who come from lower socioeconomic brackets, and their kids, or they sacrifice for their kids, and then their kids say, I know my mom or my dad didn't graduate. I know they didn't make a certain amount of money. I know they didn't have a certain amount of influence, or they may not have had a certain level of emotional intelligence. And so I'm going to be the one to pioneer, to spearhead, and to do that thing that I think would have been great for my parents to do, but they didn't have the opportunity to do that. I'm a child of immigrant parents who migrated to Canada, from West Africa and from the Caribbean. And so they did that in order to provide me with more opportunity, right? And so I had access to greater things, greater privilege, of course. And so I can think outside the box. I can think, to do greater things. I can imagine and envision different things than they did, and I'm not subject to making the same kinds of investments or sacrifices that they did, because they did it, right? So I think it's important for us to recognize sorry, that relationships do replicate. And so it's important for us to notice the trends or what's trending in our family lines, in our family lineage, and then to be intentional about applying or implementing new ways of thinking and being that are more conducive to our internal desires, that are more aligned with our values, right? And so for example, if I value a sense of freedom, I might not work for the government and buy a house, say, because that might mean that I have to go to work every day. I have to be subject to a 9 to 5 and be in a cubicle and go to a particular office and live in a particular neighborhood for all my life and be tied to a 20-year mortgage or whatever. So that might not be my ideal or value, and so I might not subscribe to that, right? So it's important for us to recognize what we need, what we want, but also important for us to recognize what we've been told and taught. And so if the things that we want are different, we need to be able to pursue those things intentionally. So relationships necessarily replicate. That doesn't mean that we cannot do different things than our parents. but it's important to talk about it because we have to be intentional if we want to do different things. Kids mostly do what they see. So I know there's a saying, it says, do what I say, not what I do. That's a parent saying. And I think we as human beings, naturally, we do what's modeled for us, right? We do what we see other people doing, and especially those we look up to, like our parents, right? Our caregivers. So I think when we're talking about raising rich kids, we have to be realistic, right? Because as adults, as parents, as aunties, uncles, or whatever, we also need to recognize what's required, right? And where we find ourselves wanting. Because we may not have been raised as rich kids. We may have been raised with deficit mindset. We may have been raised with a sense of scarcity. We may have been raised with a level of urgency to acquire, because things were depleting, resources were depleting, right? So I think it's important for us to recognize that our kids will do what they see us doing, and not necessarily what we say to do or tell them to do. And our money habits are very evident. They are very evident, right? So if we're constantly spending and buying, and stressed out, having conversations about money in the home, kids are going to pick up on that. Kids are going to notice, they're going to hear, and they're going to pick up on the values that are attached to money. And so we have to be mindful, about what we're actually doing, and how we're budgeting, or how we're managing the bills, and how we're talking about the bills and the money, and so on. So I think it's important to talk about this, in light of these facts. And the next generation matters was the last point. And I think that speaks for itself. Like, when we think about, getting married and our families and being fruitful and growing, it's a natural succession. It's like natural, evolution. There's a natural evolution to our relationships, right? We live, we reproduce, we die. And so the next generation is going to be as good as we, give them the tools to be, right? So my generation, I'm much better off than my parents when it comes to, mindset, thinking, empathy, emotional intelligence. Knowledge is continuously increasing. And so what we have, we can pass down, and do so in a really like kind, gracious, intentional, empowering, and purposeful and meaningful way to our kids. And again, not just in finances, but also in, character, in our capacity and resilience, in empathy, again, in emotional intelligence, and all these sort of aspects and areas of life that make things fruitful and purposeful and meaningful. So yeah, really important to do that. That's our why for today. And again, definition, we just want to ground ourselves in what we're talking about. What is raising rich kids? What does rich mean for us? Rich, yes, can mean having a great deal of money, wealth, being plentiful in something, having abundance, having a particular thing in large amounts. And so I have the little money tree there, which is really cute, but it reminds me of when I was a kid, and we'd have like little field trips at school, or we'd have different kinds of special days at school, like pizza day or hot dog day or whatever, barbecue, track and field day, and those things cost extra. And I would ask my parents, and I grew up partially in Ontario housing, and government housing. And part of that meant that we didn't have a lot of disposable income. Income was allocated to our necessities. And so it's interesting because I would ask for this extra money in order to, indulge or participate really in these extra things socially at school. And I remember hearing that saying, like, what do you think? Like, money grows on trees? Do you think money grows on trees? And I always remember that response, because I was like, well, I guess not, but the idea is still like, I want to participate in what's going on at school, and I didn't understand as a child that, hey, we just didn't have, the extra. And maybe I understood we didn't have the extra, but it was kind of like, why don't we have the extra? You know? Um, so I thought the money growing on trees was a cute little image. Um, so again, we can be rich in experiences, we can be rich in finances, we can be rich in our mental emotional capacity, we can be rich in spirit, and so on. And having plenty and abundance means that we are rich. And I think it's important to raise rich kids in all aspects, on all levels. I think what I've noticed most recently, or in the last maybe like 10-15 years or so, is the trend to, and I think maybe with social media and like technology and things like that, like there's a trend towards like experiences and like posting, like showing the world like what we are doing, what we have, where we are going. We're going on vacation here, we're doing this, and so on. And I think there is an aspect of that relates to or highlights relationships as well. But I think, most of it is really like rich in experiences, and not necessarily like value, not necessarily like um the value for like relationships, and the value for what relationships can bring in terms of enhancing life and quality of life, um versus like other things that we acquire. um, yes, Joanne, rich in health. Yes, I forgot about that one. And whoa, goodness, that's a huge one, right? Because if we don't have health, how can we enjoy, all of what life has to offer? How can we even become deeper? How can we, um, really even like think about growing, right? Like when we are not healthy, I know when I don't, I mean, I'm talking about a cold. I know when I don't feel good, the world does not make sense at all. And I'm not thinking about anything except for getting better. Um, so yeah, I definitely think that there's richness there as well. And passing on those ideas, those ways of taking care of the self, are important for our kids as well. And again, I was born in Toronto, but my parents are Caribbean and African. So that we grew up with bush tea. We grew up with a bush tea for everything. If you have an ailment, you need to get the alcalado and all these type of things, like rubbing down yourself, and you know a lot of food-based or plant-based remedies, some more natural remedies, to get better. Your throat is hurting, you're catching a cold, drink some lime, garlic, ginger, all these things. And I think those are also very valuable things, principles to pass on. And eating out was for special occasions. Yes. Oh my goodness, I remember that. Oh my gosh, yeah. And that's so funny because there's such a like a topsy-turvy, like a backwards, kind of trend happening. Because I mean, growing up, I mean, even now, actually, I eat out quite often. Um, and that means that our health is at risk because eating out doesn't provide the level of control over our portion sizes, over our nutrients, over our ingredients, and so on, which contributes to, health issues, high blood pressure and high cholesterol and, cardiovascular issues. I think heart disease is the number one contributing factor to poor health and death in the West, if I'm not mistaken. I think it's still heart disease. But all of that has to do with our health, with what we put in our bodies, with our foods, with our nutrition, with our diet and things like that. And even with our exercise, right? Like thinking about back in the day when we used to go outside to play, we used to be outside playing at recess time, we used to be outside playing after school. We used to play on sports teams and house league and things like that. We had sports teams at schools, and so there was actually a lot more physical activity as well. um I think it was when Obama was in office, and Michelle Obama, she campaigned for like healthier foods in school, or in schools, in order to combat the obesity rate in children, because children were now, becoming so obese because they just did not eat well, and they were quite sedentary. With the onset of all of these devices, a lot of kids, stay home on screens a lot more, and so that sort of sedentary living lifestyle contributes to obesity and to lower health. And so that's such a huge piece. Like, we have a lot of things to talk about. um we have a lot of stuff, but sometimes we are really lacking in the profound health that comes from paying attention to the richness of our lives, and passing on quality habits to our kids. And health also has to do with hygiene, like um, hygiene and etiquette and things like that. Uh, like rich in those capacities and those qualities and those abilities, um, in those ways of presenting. It's so funny. I was out not too long ago, and there was a family. The family had two boys, and one of the boys, well, one of the boys was taller, one of the boys was a little bit shorter, and I figured one was older, one was younger. But the smaller one was sitting down, like sort of straight backed, and over his burger, and sort of eating very neatly, um, and contained, and not speaking, not engaging. And then the taller one, he was like chomping away at the burger, and he was like talking with his mouth full, and the food was coming out and things like that. And I was like, wow, they presented so they were brothers, but they presented so differently. And I thought, even that, there's a way in which we show up in the world. Like, we teach our kids to show up in the world in a particular way, and it might mean just being yourself and being comfortable in your skin and not caring what anybody else thinks. But it also might mean, some etiquette or manners, or, sort of tailoring our body language, our hygiene, to suit a particular standard that we uphold and that we enforce as parents and as caregivers, right? And so our children are really a reflection of us, and they are a product of us. And so we want them to be able to enjoy, the best sort of quality of life possible. Okay, so I wanted to sort of explore how relationships within the family shape a child's perception of wealth, um, and reflect a little bit um, on our own. And you don't have to put it in the chat, it's just an opportunity to reflect, but just to think about your family dynamics, whether in the family that you grew up in, or the family that you've established of your own, and thinking about the lessons that you learned, the lessons you learned about money, the lessons you learned about wealth, the lessons you learned about being rich, where you picked up most of your ideas and most of your habits. And I distinctly remember I grew up in like the 90s, and I don't know if anybody else knows, but there was like this sort of movement in the 90s in music. It was like hip hop, R&B music. And a lot of artists were promoting, this sort of like kind of like gangster lifestyle. But it was mostly like uh wealth, material wealth, and having nice cars and having nice homes. And I think in a lot of ways that trend still continues, that there are, artists that still promote, having material things, and that being a real marker that you've made it, a real indicator of your success. But I remember growing up like as a young lady, and seeing some of these images, these pictures, these music videos, these recording artists, and really wondering about like the quality of life that these individuals had, even though they had a lot of things, right? Like what kind of quality of life did they have? Always in the media, like drama and controversy, and like all these sort of really sort of like, I guess, kind of like markers of, well, they were kind of like question marks for me. It's kind of like curious, like, what, like, are you really at peace? Like, can you sleep at night? Are you scared that somebody's gonna come get your stuff? Um, but that was the message, right? It was like, hey, you've made it if you can buy yourself a Rolls Royce, or if you can live in a particular neighborhood and afford, these kinds of floors or light fixtures or what have you. Um, and I think that was part of my messaging, like external messaging, but it was very different from my internal messaging. So like what I saw my parents doing. My parents were quite frugal, in a lot of ways. And, not very like flashy or anything like that. I didn't get the vibe that they wasted their resources. Both my parents worked for the government, and they encouraged me to get a job with the government, um, which I did. I did for a number of years, and realized that it wasn't for me. But that sense of job security, and finding a stable home and making sure that the bills were paid and that we had a roof over our head, food in the fridge, clothing on our back, and that we could also do a few things, like we could eat out every now and again, when it was a special occasion, or buy a new dress for church if it was Easter time, or have gifts to put underneath the tree at Christmas, right? So we could do some things, not everything, but I think I missed out on internalizing some of what was modeled for me. And I think that had to do with the external influences that I was also exposed to and didn't necessarily know how to respond to, because I didn't get good conversation about money when I was younger. I didn't have any financial literacy. There wasn't like a financial literacy course that I could take in school. And my parents didn't actually talk to me about money. And when I look back and I reflect, I'm like, oh yeah, they were actually really good with money, but they didn't teach me about money. And so I turned 18, I was on campus at university. Um, and there was this, I don't even remember which company it was. It was one of many credit card companies that were promoting their credit card. And I was like, yeah, sure, sign me up. I want a free t-shirt. Yeah, sure, sign me up. I want a free pen or a journal or whatever they were giving away. And I ended up, I mean, we're talking, because I remember I was probably about 25, maybe 7 years later. I had maybe like 7 or 8 credit cards to cut up and start to pay off. Like I remember turning 25 and thinking, oh my God, I'm in an immense credit card debt, along with student loan debt. And I'm finished school and I have to, start working and paying back all these bills. And I did not have good money management, good financial literacy, good understanding of how to make money for me, of how to save money, really how to be disciplined. It was just how to delay gratification. um I didn't have the skills. I didn't have the information, and it wasn't taught to me, in my family. And I think it's important for us to talk about money, to talk about money and to ask questions about money. And I don't even know if my parents would have had, the ability to really like teach me about money, um, in the way that they understood it. I think they did a lot of things out of fear, like fear that they wouldn't have enough, and so they saved a lot. Fear that they wouldn't have enough, so they didn't take risks. Like stocks and bonds, and like, you know, taking risks in terms of like financial investments. I didn't hear about that. Um, but we always had enough. We always had enough. It was never going to be a situation where, we invested in the stock market, and it blew up and we were super wealthy, but we definitely had enough. And I think, out of that out of that just sort of way of living, I would take the absence of the conversation as a point of reference, right? Because I think, had I had the opportunity to ask questions and it was an open conversation, that I would be different, financially. My both of my parents are accountants. Like, think about that. They are accountants, and in my mind, I'm like, there's no reason why I shouldn't know everything there is to know about balancing budgets and, assets and liabilities, because, both of them are very good with money. Um, but yeah, they didn't really teach me. They didn't really teach me, and neither did school. And I think to myself, whose responsibility is it? I mean, at this point, I think it's my responsibility. Um, but I also think that we can have, sort of a broader conversation about how we do better to create those, sort of those good relational, bonds between us and our kids, so that we can raise rich kids, right? So that we can teach them some of the lessons that we've learned. Or even if we haven't, even if we don't have the knowledge, we can direct them. We can point them in the right direction, to take a finance course or take an accounting course or what have you. Um, so yeah, just, teaching and learning about wealth, about money, about growth, about evolution, evolving, um, and so on. I think those are all, relationship, um, like those are all relationship, um, what's the word? Enhancers, relationship enhancers. Um, yeah, so I don't know. How do you guys teach your kids? How did you learn as kids? That may be the question I might throw out. Um, and I just thought of this. When I was appointed, I was asked to be a godmother. I remember the first gifts that I gave to my godchildren was like the RESP thing and life insurance. Like, those were things that I didn't know anything about growing up, that I didn't have, like access to. And I just remember thinking, I'm gonna, do that for my godchildren, and kind of set them up, um, as best as I can. It's a small thing to do, each month. But it's a financial thing, right? It's a financial literacy thing. It's a financial, support thing, um, that can help them in the long run, right? Okay. I feel like we're Or slowy today. Okay, why is it so hard to talk about money? Yeah, I thought about this as well because I was like, how come people don't have more conversations about money when finances are one of the leading um, causes of disagreement in marriage and can be cited as a catalyst towards irreconcilable differences and then divorce. So finances, money, these kinds of things can break up partnerships, business partnerships, can break up families, can break up marriages, can break up friendships. You know, people arguing, you didn't pay me back, all the things. Why is it so hard to talk about money? I think it's taboo to discuss money on some level because and especially within families, because there's sometimes shame involved, like, oh, we should be better off, we should be this, we should be that, or so and such are better off than we are. Um, and I think sometimes there's like pain attached to talking about money. And I also think there's a lack of understanding when it comes to like, you know, budgeting, saving, and teaching our kids how to budget and save. You know, I had a piggy bank when I was younger, but I remember breaking it open because it was one of those ones that didn't have like the thing at the bottom. And I broke it open one day because I think I wanted like ice cream or gum at the store or something. Just ridiculous. But but I think you know, being able to sort of go to my parents and talk to, you know, talk to them about like what is it to save? Well, what am I saving for? Um, and get some answers, you know, would have been helpful. Um, but yeah, I didn't have that. And I think it's difficult to talk about money in general with people because we all have different ideas about what are good ways. And even reading re-listening to, you know, Rich Dad Poor Dad this week, I was, you know, really amused by the difference in the approach to money that each dad had and what advice they gave. And they really painted the picture so clearly. Like, who do you want to be in this world? You know, do you want to be a person who owns things, who spearheads, who innovates, or do you want to be like an automaton, a worker? You know, our society, our curriculum, our education system um, really uh, teaches us how to work, how to be employees, how to work to build somebody else's bottom line. And so even you know uh, detoxing from what we've been taught or told is normal, natural, real truth is difficult at times because the messaging is just so prevalent, you know, and so perpetual each and every day. And I think that it was really cool to listen to the book again from my vantage point and be like, yeah, you know what? It is important to take risk. And I've actually lived the rich dad advice, you know, road, but it's actually a really challenging road to live when you think about it, because innovating and being creative and being an entrepreneur and taking risks and doing the things that put you in a position to govern your life um, and sort of be in control of the things that we can be in control over, of course, that is actually harder. It's harder than taking instruction. It's harder than, you know, status quo. It's harder than, you know, finding a job and going there 9 to 5. When you check out, you go home and you watch Netflix and you do the groceries and cook dinner and sit with your family and so on. It's a different kind of lifestyle and mindset, and it requires a different level of investment. And so I think there's a lot that goes into having these conversations about money, right? Because it's an identity thing. It connects back to how we see ourselves, how we feel about ourselves, and what we've also done in life that we're either proud of or not proud of, right? That we might regret as well. Um, so yeah, I think it's important to talk about it. And I remember I saw like it was a clip it was on social media somewhere, and it was in China, and it was a video of Chinese kindergarten. And you guys, it's wild. You guys should go look it up if you get a chance. Chinese kids in kindergarten, um, they learn real life skills. So like their assignments and tasks are um like washing dishes and doing needlework and cooking and things like that. I'm talking like 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds, like cooking, you know, on a stove and like serving each other and cooking their own breakfast and lunch and things like that. But in China, financial literacy is actually taught from a young age, in the curriculum. So understanding how money moves, how money works, how money grows, and things like that on a global scale is taught at a very young age. So they come out with a very good understanding um, of how to gain wealth, right? Because their understanding of how money works. Money's not a real thing, right? Money is like it's like paper and coins or what have you, but there's value attached to those paper and coins. And sometimes, especially in our very digital world, we can learn how to move and make money without obviously anything crossing through our fingers, um, and that's with apps and programs and things like that now. But back in the day it was with credit cards. I remember when credit cards and debit cards came out, it's like, oh my gosh, we don't have to carry around cash anymore. My mom's not going to give me $5 to go to McDonald's, when a combo could be bought for $5. Back in the day, McDonald's combos were $3.99. It's wild. Um, but yeah, I think it's important for us to, and I'll be mindful of the time because we're sort of sitting here chatting. But for us to have conversations about money. Okay. There's a difference between being poor and being broke. This is a direct quote from the book, and I loved it because um, being broke is a circumstance, right? You don't have any money. Being poor is an identity. It's like a mindset, right? So one is like forever and always, I'm poor. And one is, oh, for right now in this moment, at present, I don't have any money, or I don't have as much money as I want to have. And one is really habit creating, right? So if I'm broke, then there's something happening between my income and my spending. And so habits really are what create wealth in our lives, right? And so whether we're creating wealth in our minds, whether we're creating wealth in our bodies, whether we're creating richness in our pocketbooks, right? We have to look at building those good habits, right? Going to the gym, eating healthy, praying for spiritual health, managing our emotions, expressing, setting boundaries, regulating for emotional health, um, and then of course, for financial health, right? We're looking at being um, financially literate, let's say, and understanding that a temporary circumstance or situation is not an extended or eternal um, uh, um, way of life, right? Um, a millionaire, I thought this was a cute quote. A millionaire as an adjective, someone having little to no money, because so different from a millionaire. One letter off, my goodness, right? But the one letter off is so significant, is so significant. And when we think about it, every one of us has the opportunity to turn that N into an M, right? If we would lean into what's required, if we lean into, the mindset that's necessary to recognize temporary versus eternal, right? Um, so what are you really teaching your kids? You guys can think about that. Think about it in terms of what you're buying, what you're not buying, what you're telling them, how you're taking risks, what values you're instilling in them, right? Should you go to school, get an education so you can get a good job? Or are you in the business of expansion, of growth, of evolution, of passion work, of self-actualization? Like, what are you teaching your kids, especially by, your own example, right? Are you doing the things that you want to be doing? Are you living a rich life? Are you living a life that's outside the box? Are you in the people pile, right? And so just being able to sort of recognize what you're modeling for your kids. Um, and then of course doing your due diligence to make changes. Should you be teaching or modeling for your kids principles and qualities um, that you realize aren't helpful or beneficial for them in the long run, right? I think most I agree with this. In the book, it said most people work for everyone but themselves, right? They're working, working for their company, working for the government, paying taxes and so on. And the quote was, financial struggle is often directly the result of people working all their lives for someone else. Financial struggle is directly the result of people working all their lives for someone else, right? And that means someone else controls your bottom line. Someone else controls how much you get, how much you gain, how much you grow, all that kind of stuff. And you are limited. You are boxed in by what they say is enough for you. And so sometimes, of course, and the saying goes, when our finances increase, our spending increases, which is why it's not necessarily a finance problem or issue. It's a personality issue, right? It's a personal choice issue when it comes to money and how we govern our money. And so a lot of people are like, oh, I need to make more money, I need to get a better job. No, you need to manage your money differently, and think differently about your money so that your money will work for you, or your money will do what it needs to do, right? Maybe you're living outside your means. Maybe you don't need that new car, right? So it's a mindset, it's an understanding. And what I really loved about the book was it said that the rich use their assets and the gains they make from their assets to purchase things, to purchase luxuries, right? Whereas the poor and the middle class, they use their own sweat, tears, and blood and their own money to purchase luxuries so that they can feel affluent and rich or what have you. And I love that, because it's like, well, if I put $1 million in the bank, okay, maybe 100, I don't know, 100,000 in the bank, and that 100,000 in 5 years makes me, $50,000, and I use that $50,000 to buy, a base model Tesla. Well, I have now, sorry, I have now, sorry, hold on. I think we stopped sharing for some reason. Oh, hold on. Deborah, I don't know if you can restore this, but it looks like the sharing has gone. Do you see that?
We see you, but we don't see the slide that we were seeing.
Yeah, what just happened? I can't share anymore. I think you're the host, so you might have to make me the host or give me permissions here. I don't know what happened. Or did you cancel my share? Uh-oh. Can you make me the
I
host?
made,
And
yeah,
then,
I made you the host again.
okay, perfect. And then I'll see what I can do here. Uh, oh. Okay. Is that working?
No, we still only see just you.
Okay. How's that? Are we seeing that?
Yes, we can see now.
Okay, perfect. I hope I can do this. Okay. All right. I think I'm gonna do this. How do I get rid of this? All right. Okay. So, uh-oh, this is not moving. Why is this not moving? Okay. All right, I think we're good. Okay, and I have like 5 minutes left. I'm gonna run through this really quickly. Okay, so yeah, the question is what are we really teaching our kids, right? And looking at where financial struggle comes from. And like I was saying before, our education system really does develop our skill set to, do a job as opposed to be like an innovator, right? So I think it's important for us to recognize that, um, and not necessarily desire to be like wage or income earners, but to, you know, establish business, right? Not necessarily um, uh, become like a professional at something, right? Not to have a profession, but to have a business. And that's the distinction, one of the distinctions that the book makes, right? That we ought to have a business, not necessarily a profession. Um, and look at what assets we can acquire from our business. All right, I'm going to do 30 seconds per slide. Let's see. Okay, proper physical exercise increases our chances for health, and proper mental exercises increases our chances for wealth. So how do we create wealth? How do we raise rich kids? We have to do mental exercise. We have to teach people how to think, teach our kids how to think, and we have to do the work of thinking ourselves, meaning we have to learn about financial literacy, learn about how money works, and how money can work for us and for our children and for our inheritances and for all the things, right? Building wealth. Um, there's a saying that it's not money that makes people rich, it's thoughts and ideas that make people rich. And I love this like little brain skipping here in the photograph, right? Because we do have to exercise our brains. And I know that there's, again, a lot of messaging and a lot of influence when it comes to turning our brains off, right? Oh, we just want to like veg out and all the things, but that's not going to get us. And there's a scripture as well that says something like lazy people or people that don't think or what have you, are going to end up like poor and destitute. It's a Proverbs. It's somewhere in there. Um, all right. And there's a quote. Louise Hart says that great opportunities are not seen with our eyes; they are seen with our mind. Great opportunities are not seen with our eyes; they are seen with our minds. And so we have to exercise our minds. A few stats really quickly. 9 out of 10 parents report that it's extremely important that their kids become financially stable adults, not necessarily emotionally intelligent adults. Majority of parents prioritize financial success over character development. And then children from highly emotionally intelligent homes are more likely to succeed academically and professionally. And I think that speaks volumes for the kinds of qualities we want to teach and pass on to our kids. I also think there are for sure changing trends here that we do need to be mindful of as well. Grit. This is the single most important distinguisher of individuals who succeed and those who do not. Grit is passion and perseverance for long-term goals. It is living life as if it is a marathon and not a sprint. And it is the number one predictor of future success, both academically and professionally. And that amounts to, of course, if we are using our minds and exercising our brain and we are being innovators and creators, that of course amounts to finances as well. And so in order to raise rich kids, we need to raise them with grit, passion, perseverance, the ability to delay gratification, right? The ability to look towards and work towards long-term goals. All right, tips to get started. These are directly from Rich Dad, Poor Dad. 7 chapters, 7 points, and I'll read them really quickly. Focus on assets, not on liabilities. Assets are not what we think they are. A lot of people in our day still believe that assets are things like houses and expensive clothing that we can resell and expensive cars and things like that. Those are not assets. Assets are very simply defined in the book as things that put money in your pocket. Liabilities are things that take money out of your pocket. So very, very simple definition, which I love. So focus on acquiring assets, things like I don't know, publishing a book that's can be resold, or doing a course that can be resold over and over with very little like passive income, right? Very little input from yourself. Looking at different streams of income. If it's real estate, then not real estate that you're paying for, real estate that you're flipping, real estate that is going to give you rental income, things like that, things that put money in your pocket as opposed to take money out of your pocket. Number two, get a financial education. Very, very simple, very, very easy. Go and take a course. Go and learn. Go with your kids. There's a lot of courses online, especially through social media, that you can access, like for teaching kids financial literacy specifically. So it gives them, like, different activities, playing different games, so that they can learn how to budget, and they can internalize, what it would be like to be wealthy and to think differently about money. Number three is run your own business. That's very straightforward as well. And I think we teach kids this, and, like, hey, get a lemonade stand and sell lemonade or what have you, in small ways, but teaching them, and encouraging them and supporting them in running their own business and making mistakes and losing money and all that kind of stuff, so that they can then not only experience what it feels like, but also begin to think about how to problem solve when things don't go as planned. Number four is understand the tax code and the legal system. Very straightforward as well. You can't break the system, work the system, and maximize within the system if you don't know the system. So you got to learn the system. I worked for Revenue Canada for years. I don't like taxes, and I don't like Revenue Canada, or like all the, intricacies, but valuable information to have, especially if you're going to own a business, right? You still got to do, you got to do it legally. So learn the laws. Learn to invent money, right? Inventing money, again, is being innovative, is using your mind to be creative. Work to learn, not for money. Work to learn, not for money. So the rich don't work for money is another quote from the book that I really love. And learning and personal growth is what is going to get you to the place to become the person that can stand or sustain in the place of wealth, right? So the person who wins the lottery and then ends up broke 5 years later, they haven't become the person yet who's able to sustain that level of wealth, right? Because you need a certain amount of discipline, a certain amount of know-how, and so on, in order to sustain and to grow that amount of wealth. And so, there's lots of, like, basketball players who make millions of dollars in contracts in their 20s, and in their 30s they're working, at the car wash. Like, what do you mean? Right? So you have to work to learn, not for the money. Learn yourself, become more self-aware, learn different skills and disciplines, learn how to take risks, calculated risks, learn how to learn. So work to learn, not for money, which is another principle from the book, which I loved. Rich Dad had the kids working for him for free, but they were learning, right? They were learning how to run a business. They were learning how to deal with people. And this is what our relationship series is all about. I really do believe the wave of the future, especially with AI and all these, different digital and technological advances, that being a people person, a person who can handle and do well in relationships, like with other people, with other humans, I believe that's the wave of the future, because that will be few and far between. We will be the go-to individuals to deal with mankind, to deal with behaviors, while everyone else is dealing with computers. So, and we're always going to need this. We're always going to need the FaceTime, the you and me time, the relationship time, because this is what we are created for, right? This is what feeds us and fuels us and gives us meaning, and revolutionizes our lives, gives us purpose. And so I really do believe that learning how to do relationships well and to work with people. And I don't get paid for this. I don't make money off of this or anything like that. But I am learning. I'm learning each and every day, each and every week, how to do this thing better and better. And I really do believe that it makes me richer in my capacity, richer in my empathy, richer in understanding, richer in purpose. So work to learn, not for money. And then lastly, take financial risks. And of course, those are calculated risks. And if you are in a position of privilege, in a position where, you have others who can help and support you, then it's easier to take those risks. But I love that. I just love that advice, right? Take risks, because risks are going to get you revolutionary relationships, right? Take risks in conversation, take risks in teaching, take risks in exploration, being curious about starting new things, right? Come up with ideas and try them, right? And do it with passion and excitement. And hey, what's the worst that could happen? You'll lose some money. Like, there are greater things in life to gain. And we are talking about revolutionary relationships, which are the essence of life. So do the work, heal for real, sow what you want to grow. So we're sowing in to what we want to see come out of our lives and our relationships, and especially our kids. Okay. Let's see, let's close out. Apply, change, teach. So this is our personal challenge to act. So one thing that you will act on this week, I'm going to finish reading the book. That's my act for this week. And I'm also going to revisit a potential investment that I looked into a couple of years back that I didn't follow through on. So I'm actually going to go back and take my own advice or take the book's advice to take a risk. Mentiverse and the YouTube channel will have the replays for us. And next week, we are going to be talking about family legacy. Whoa. So next week, we're going to continue our transformational conversations on another area that impacts our family relationships. Of course, legacy, which is what you leave behind. So we're looking at what kind of culture you leave behind, what kind of inheritance you leave behind when you die. What are people going to say, and what is your family going to carry on, right? And maybe even thinking about the family that you came from, right? Did you like the legacy that they left you? Was there a legacy of like drama? Was there a legacy of poverty? Was there a legacy of like contention? Was there a legacy of like failed relationships, or not failed, but maybe like divorce or broken relationships or things like that? So we have to look at where we came from and what we're building. And I think that it's important for us to do that intentionally, of course, because that facilitates and helps revolutionize our relationships. So let's think about that. Let's talk about that. What do we want to change? What's present now? All families have like a set of beliefs, right? So what did you guys believe? What were you taught? What were the rules that you follow? What were the values, the attitudes that were present in your family or passed down from your previous generations through the messages that you received as a child? I was an African princess, right? That's a legacy marker that has been passed down, right? We come from kings and queens, and so I couldn't adopt the Western ideals or ideas about Black women, right? I wasn't allowed to. It was like, you're a beautiful Black woman, you are a queen and a princess, and you come from royalty from the motherland, from Africa. And that's a legacy. That's a legacy that was passed down with values and attitudes attached, and very different from, some of my other friends who are racialized, live in melanated skin, especially from the US as well. Very different ideas passed down and messages received from their parents. But at the end of the day, this becomes our worldview. And so we want to be thinking about what legacy we've received and what legacy we're passing on as we think about our relationships. Thank you guys so much for being here again this week. We went a little bit over time, but we had a little break at the beginning and in the middle. So thank you guys for sticking with me. And we will see you next week for Family Legacy. It will be another great, awesome, transformational conversation. Again, you can get the replays on our YouTube channel and on the Mentiverse app. Have an awesome rest of the day. Thank you guys so much for spending your lunch with us. Take good care and have revolutionary relationships.